Everybody. Thank you very much to the organizers, of course, for inviting us to speak at this conference. It's great to see so many people who we know. And we have a lot of brains in this room, and I shall try and use them to maximum effect later. So I'm going to ask you to challenge the panelists, because indeed we have some great minds on the panel as well. We have a really nice spread of member states and industry, and I think this could be a very interesting debate. So my preference, once these guys have opened up, will be to ask you to challenge them. Yeah, so get ready with your questions. Now, we can control cybersecurity. We can't control acts of God, and unfortunately, two of our panelists were not able to make it due to storms in the Schiphol area. So Stevie Wilson from Europol EC3 and Hans Alder Arling couldn't make it. And of course, we greatly miss their presence, but we have equally prestigious members on the panel, so maybe I'll start with these. We have Mircea Grigoras, did I pronounce that correctly?
Yeah, that's okay.
Who is Acting General Director of CERT-RO, Romania, and we have Jean-Baptiste Demaison, who is Senior Advisor in International Policy Affairs, and also at ANSSI in France, and also the Chair of the ENISA Management Board. We also have Christoffer Karsberg, who has possibly the longest title in the world.
Yeah.
So I'm going to read it very carefully. Program Manager, International Affairs at the Office of Cybersecurity and Critical Infrastructure Protection, the Swedish Civil Contingencies Agency.
Yeah.
And if you remember that, you're very good. Then we have Axel Petri, who is Senior Vice President of Group Security Governance at Deutche Telekom AG, and Ilias, who is Senior Director at Symantec Government Affairs. So I think it's a great lineup, and I certainly don't want to take up their time, so I've given each of these gentlemen 5 minutes to make their introductory pitch, and then it's your ball game, unless no one speaks, in which case I will challenge them. Let's just, as everyone's equal, let's go left to right. Ilias, you have 5 minutes.
Lovely. Thank you, Steve, and I'd like to thank the organizers for giving me the opportunity to be here with you today. Cooperation, a very tricky word in EU terms because it covers all manners of sins. As far as I'm concerned, how is cooperation working or not working in Europe? What are the conditions that we see for effective cooperation? We're a company that is participating in a number of, let's say, groupings and a number of cooperation structures that are in place within the European Union. Our experience has been that the success of the recipe is always pretty much the same. How do you bring together competent people or competent individuals, competent, when I say not just good at what they do, but also competent from the point of view of having competence, having a skill, having a skin in the game, having capabilities that are necessary in order to deliver to the mission. That's the one bit. Bringing that group together, making sure that that group is recognizable with each other. So the different individuals, how do you build the trust? How do you build the cooperation between them? And then the third aspect is very much around making sure that you've got a well-defined and narrow mission, a clear goal that is win-win for the different players in order for them to be able to achieve it. As long as you've got the right people in a narrow goal, in a clearly defined goal that everyone understands, and a community of interest around it, this is how, based on our experience, every time you're going to have effective public-private partnerships, you're going to have effective cooperation models. So do we see that happening in Europe? In my eyes, governance is critical in order to be able to achieve that, because through governance, you will build the necessary trust. I can bring a lot of examples where I see that works, and I can bring some examples where, let's say, it works less. Definitely a question of maturity as well. Who do you have around the table? Again, the point I made about competence. And I think that the more we are going into this discussion of how we do cybersecurity better, the more we understand that this is a community problem, the more we're going to see that all of this pulling us together and therefore also building those structures in place. I'm certainly hopeful that we're going to go there. And I think it's fair to say that also the package that the Commission put forward very, very recently is going to be pulling us towards that direction. There you go, Steve, very quickly.
You were well within your limits, so thank you very much for that. So, right people, clear goals, governance is critical. Do you agree? Hard not to agree in some ways.
Well, exactly. It's pretty hard not to agree. I mean, I think we've grown a little bit from where I set out a few years back. For example, I'm very happy that cybersecurity is right now one of the sexy subjects, as someone said earlier in the audience. A few years back, when you talk about cybersecurity, everyone was looking at us like we were speaking like an alien language or something. Now everyone's talking about it, and that's really important for the awareness. That's really important because it gives us some opportunity to explain why is it important. And it's more than opening a market for products, on cybersecurity products, or talk about standards and so on. And the cooperation behind it is really, really important because at a technical level, for example, I represent a national CERT. At a technical level, we have to cooperate. We cannot tackle cybersecurity on our own. We need partners from the private sector, we need partners from the public sector. So pretty much at the core of everything that is going on is cooperation. We've had a number of very good experiences dealing with the private sector. And as mentioned earlier by Ilias, there are so many moments in which the private sector and the public sector or any type of organization dealing with cybersecurity have the same interest, and that should be definitely that should work in tackling all types of attacks. But also, I would stress a little bit more on the way we share information. And the way we share information right now, well, there have been some steps. I mean, at European level, we had exercises that helped us a lot. We had CERT network. Again, one huge point that will increase cooperation. But tactical cooperation with the private sector, I think, is the most important thing. And then here comes the problem. Sometimes the private sector has a problem in sharing information because, well, they have customers that they want a specific non-disclosure agreement, or they have a number of other types of engagements that do not allow them to contribute to this. And I think we can solve this through policy making. That's why I'm pretty hopeful about this cybersecurity package that was launched yesterday. Again, I would stress more about cooperation with the private sector.
Okay, very good. So what I particularly liked in what you just said there from a personal perspective, it is we need to be careful how we share information. And one of the things we say at ENISA quite often is we go to endless conferences where people say we want to share more information, whereas in fact, we need to share the right information for the right goal. And this is a very important message. So I totally agree with this. It's no good just having a whole bunch of information. You have to know what to do with it. What else did I pick up there? Sharing with the private sector. I will offer another comment before I pass over to Christoffer, who's also in the government sector. I was presenting at a conference a couple of weeks ago, and I heard the opposite point of view, that there was someone in the audience who said that they gave lots of stuff to the public sector and nothing ever came back again. So I think you can see it from both directions. Yeah?
I think that's definitely another challenge. From the public sector, for CSERT, for example, if you're talking about some threat that is specifically, for example, cybercrime related, in most of the European countries, you have to work with law enforcement, and it's normal to do that.
Right.
But in that moment, when law enforcement comes to the stage, they have a different way of doing things, and not all information is available. So you basically end up taking some information, giving it to the law enforcement, and because of the procedural way of doing things or instrumenting cybercrime cases, they cannot give something back. Again.
Okay. Very good. So let's not turn it too far. It's a pity we don't have Steve Wilson here with us today, because he would, of course, have had things to say about this.
Okay.
But so going from member state to member state, Christopher, what is your take on this?
Yes. First of all, I like the framing of this conference a lot, and and also one advantage to be in a late panel is that you can pick up some keywords, and I use this nice pamphlet to pick up some words. For instance, from the Prime Minister: trust, change of mindset, transparency in risk management, transparency in risk management. And also Mr. Poupard said, develop the national capacities as a prerequisite for EU capacities. I'm going to bring in a topic that may be odd in this context, but I think it's, for me, it's important to put this in, because it could be an obstacle to the information sharing will and culture. The regulatory part of this, and especially the mechanism supervision in the context of information sharing. This is one challenge of many when it comes to trust, which is a prerequisite when it comes to sharing vulnerabilities and information about incidents, of course. So I will focus on the notion of supervision as a possible obstacle when it comes to information sharing, but also a possibility. So I've been working at the Swedish Telekom regulator, heading a section working with network and information security supervision, and also at ENISA working with telecom security portfolio there, and chairing one of the expert groups with the telecom regulators from all the member states dealing with network and information security issues. And during these years, supervision has been a central part of the discussions. So now I'm working with the NIS Directive implementation in Sweden, and I'm a member of the NIS Cooperation Group. And also in the NIS Directive, supervision is introduced as an important tool for driving security for essential services and digital services. So in Sweden, we are now assigning one supervisory agency for each sector, defined in the directive, and incident reporting goes from the operators to us at MSB, the Civil Contingencies Agency, and we have to make sure that the supervisory agencies get access to these reports for their supervision. Okay, so when I say supervision, what comes up in your mind? Is it this mean beast that takes all the chance that it can get to punish the actor as soon as it fails protecting its services? Or is it the curling agency that brushes in front of the actor in order to move the actor in the right direction? The supervisory authority has a crucial role here, because with its mandate, it has the power to pose fines for not complying. But at the same time, it's demanding incident reports as part of the regulation. So now the reporting actor has a dilemma. What can they say in the reports? And what will happen when they have turned in the report? The whole idea with incident reporting is dependent on the frequency of the reporting and the quality in the reports. So here's my point. Incident reporting needs to be understood by all parties in the process to be part of a learning process. I know there are different supervision schemes and cultures in different countries, which drive different ways of implementing the reporting flow. But in any case, if the supervisory authorities receive incident reports, they need to have this relationship and signal that they will not punish the actor as a consequence of reporting. Instead, they should encourage reporting, but be a pain in the butt if the actor doesn't report. So then the supervisor needs to ask for as much information it needs in order for them to make an analysis of the situation and land in an informed decision. So this decision, I think, should be based on a requirement for the actor to come up with a plan regarding what measures to take and when in order to minimize the risk for repeating a similar type of incident.
2 minutes.
Yes. So now I'm a bit provocative here, but there's a lot of talk also in the directive about fines and the size of the fines and so on. But in my opinion, fines are the last step when everything else has failed. So actually posing a fine means there has been a failure in the communication and in correcting the problem. So the whole idea is to learn from past incidents, and here the incident reporting and information sharing is central. You assess what happened, document, and report the incident. And with this knowledge from the incident, you adjust the risk assessment and the security measures. So it's a continuous learning curve, leads to continuous improvements in security. But in order to make this happen, the actor needs to feel ownership for its security, and compliance is not enough as a driving force, I think. The security aim should be to go beyond legislation and supervision towards the insight that security is part of the core operations. So for that reason, the supervisory agency needs to treat the actor as someone that owns its security and can improve. And this takes time to develop. It's a mutual trust between the actor and the supervisory authority, but if they get there, then information sharing will start with good quality information and mutual learning. So 3 points. The actor will learn from its experiences and continuously improve. The supervisor will learn what to focus on in its supervisory actions, preferably through preventive supervision, but it doesn't always work. And in a really mature relationship, it can even gather the actors in its sector to discuss vulnerabilities, threats, and incidents. And society will get accurate information to act upon. So this is one aspect of building a trustful national information sharing culture. And this will, of course, also be beneficial for the cross-border information sharing.
Very good. Thank you very much. So, very interesting, different points here, and I think you raised a very interesting point of obligatory reporting versus voluntary reporting, for instance, and the different problems that we have to deal with when we're dealing with obligatory reporting. So, Jean-Baptiste, perhaps you could give us your point of view on this.
Thank you very much, Steve. And first, let me join Christoffer by thanking the Estonian authorities for this wonderful conference. And as you heard, I am within ANSSI a senior policy advisor, and for that reason, I will provide you with a policy perspective to the issue of cooperation on a European level. And I'll say, I mean, to put it like this, that basically we would have had this discussion 10 years ago. The question, and probably my intervention would have been to ask you the question, how can we cooperate on a European level with 28 member states, and how could we achieve such an objective? And I believe we've reached a new era. Now the question is not about that, it's about how can we cooperate more? Of course, you all know the NIS Directive, and the establishment of the CERT network is a very important step, a formal step. We have established a formal cooperation network where our national and governmental CERTs interact, exchange information, and in case of incidents and crises such as the ones we had during the summer, I'm talking about WannaCry and NotPetya, this CERT network actually exchange information in a very efficient way, although with very low capacities, as this is a very recent network and the tools are being built right now as we talk. So earlier this morning, my Director General talked about several principles which he considered important to build this cooperation on European level. And the first one was trusted links. And I believe CERT network is basically the trusted link that was missing between all of the member states. So the effort for us is going to be mainly put in the functioning of this network in the future. And for those who are not aware, a dedicated technical platform supporting the functioning of that network is currently being built and hopefully will come into function as soon as possible. The second aspect is talk the same language. And this is also what we are doing right now. It's working on taxonomies, working on standard operating procedures, being able to work together. So we have today these two elements. So now the question is, what is the next step? Well, first of all, next step is doing the first step. And it's important to remind that, as sometimes some people are always expecting more than what we are already doing, while we need to start implementing the mechanisms that we agree upon. Now, next step, and I think the cyber package that was released yesterday is really interesting from that perspective, talking about a possible cooperation framework in case of cyber crisis, going beyond the sole technical level, but also to the operational level and the strategic and political level is also very important. The European Union is a very powerful tool to this regard. Crisis management is something that has been done for years in Europe, not necessarily in the cyber field, but we have mechanisms such as the integrated political crisis response mechanisms. We have tools provided by the treaties such as the solidarity clause, etc. We have entities, we have bodies, responsibilities need now to be clarified, of course, on a voluntary basis. And I will stop here with a very simple last thought, and then we can, of course, discuss all of this. And that has been said and by Ilias in his intervention, can only work if everyone commits to that cooperation. And this is probably true also for operators on a national level. And committing is about willingness to take part, and willingness to take part to operational cooperation. And we're talking about cooperation on very sensitive affairs. I mean, we're talking about cyber attacks targeting companies, commercial vital interests, possibly administrations, and we hope not, but possibly critical infrastructures. And that means that to be able to work, such a cooperation needs to be voluntary. And we know that in other domains, let's take law enforcement cooperation with Europol, and where we have voluntary cooperation, the level of cooperation can go extremely far. And that is probably something we need to seek to achieve. And trust building will require voluntary commitment of all constituents to that cooperation. And to that regard, the NIS Directive is an excellent first step. And this CERT network that has been established and facilitates voluntary cooperation shows already that this can work. This has worked already, and it is going to work even better in the future. So I'll stop here, and happy to answer any questions.
Some excellent remarks coming out here already, and I hope you'll pick up on them later. Here's a secret about me. I spent most of my career in the private sector, and then I moved into the public sector, and I didn't have a clue what you were talking about. So this thing about language, I really had to learn all this stuff about recitals and critical infrastructure, etc. So I think you've hit on a very important point. And when I move between different elements of the cybersecurity society, I hear very different language. So Axel, we started with industry, we end with industry. What do you think? Do we talk the same language?
Oh, well, I hope so, yeah. Well, first of all, let me join Jean-Baptiste in thanking him, or in joining him in thanking the organizers and the Estonian presidency, and also in the assessment of where we stand. Yeah. Right. So I think very, very important steps have been made with the NIS Directive. much more important steps have been made yesterday by the publishing of the cybersecurity package. But probably, Jean-Baptiste, I'm one of the guys who is already thinking about the next step and the step beyond. So probably what I would like to do today is to elaborate a little bit on the practical experiences and giving you 2 use cases we had recently at Deutsche Telekom. So the first thing is, I hope or I fear, however you want to name it. Many of you are aware of that. In November 2016, there has been this Mircea botnet attack. It was not targeted at our customers at Deutsche Telekom, but it affected a specific router, and nearly 1 million of our customers have been offline. Offline in any regards, be it TV, be it phone, be it internet. So it was very important for us, and it was a very interesting weekend for all of us to test this cooperation. And I have to say, in Germany, the cooperation went very well. Yeah, because we had a very good cooperation with the BSI, our IT security authority. Arne Schönbohm has been speaking a couple of hours ago. We had a very good cooperation with the German Federal Police, yeah, and even the perpetrator has been caught, which is not normal for a botnet attack. And we had also a very good cooperation with our supplier. But the topic is that the supplier hasn't been obliged by law, by written law, to cooperate with us. He has been obliged to cooperate with us by our contract we had with him. Yeah? So if it would have been another telco company or another supplier, there wouldn't be the obligation for cooperation. So that would be an issue. And I assume we wouldn't have made it within 24 hours to bring our 1 million customers back online if there hasn't been that obligation. Mm-hmm. So that is probably something that is missing and that we should think about as the next step. And the second use case, it's also already mentioned, WannaCry Petya. I think we all had a lot of luck that it was first WannaCry and then Petya, or non-Petya, however you want to name it, because non-Petya was much better programmed than WannaCry. Mm-hmm. WannaCry woke all of us up, and there was been patching and updating like hell. And afterwards, and it didn't work really well, WannaCry, but afterwards Petya, non-Petya was better. And if Petya would have hit all of us, the entire community first, then we would have been in much more deeper trouble. Mm-hmm. And why? Because it was a weakness that was known to somebody who also is a stakeholder, because a law enforcement agency, the NSA. Yeah, so this is why I say there are still some steps to do. So first step, we have to include the entire value chain in the obligations, yeah? In the reporting obligations, but also in the obligations to close weaknesses, which means hard and software providers that are not included in the NIS Directive, at least not entirely. And also, as far as I understood my overnight reading of the cybersecurity package, not targeted in this new cybersecurity package. So that's one issue for me. We should also the cooperation or enlarge the cooperation and reporting obligations to law enforcement agencies, yeah? Which also includes no backdoors for them. Because if they don't cooperate and share this information, but use it for their own purposes, we create weaknesses. Mm-hmm. And I don't put aside the need that they have to do something in law enforcement. I'm an absolute supporter of giving them all the power they need or giving all the education they need, but backdoors are not the right means. Because you can't limit backdoors to legitimate purposes. So they have to cooperate, they have to reveal the vulnerabilities they are aware of. If you want to cooperate, you have to have common rules. Yeah? So on which common ground do you operate? Yeah? So we need some kind of certification, standardization as common rules, because we all have to make sure that we are speaking the same language and have the same goals. Not only for high assurance goods, but also for IoT devices. This is something that is missing, and also in the new cyber package. And probably last but not least, to make it not too big here, two other points. Of course, we have to make sure that there is overarching cooperation and continued information exchange, but we shouldn't do it too formal, because formalism kills cooperation in my experience. And the second thing is we shouldn't only assess or limit our cooperation to the response phase. We should also start in the protect phase, which means cooperating on simple and easy to use cybersecurity solutions, probably also as some kind of new products coming out of Europe to be a counterpart to what is coming from over the ocean or somewhere else in the world.
Excellent, excellent. So just a couple of remarks on this. Quite interesting for me. I've been in this business for 25 years. And your last remark is very interesting, because when I started, it was all about preparation. Now it's all about response. And somewhere it needs to be in the middle. You have to have both aspects, of course. So I'm very keen to hear, although we have good response mechanisms, we can't forget the preparation ones. But look, some great experience on this panel, yeah? People with a lot of experience in cooperation. Anyone want to ask a question? Please. I don't know how the microphone works, by the way. Could we get a microphone to this gentleman? Perhaps you just say who you are and if there's any particular person you would like to address the question to.
My name's John Foley. I'm from Denmark. I'm with a private company. I'm the CEO of a cybersecurity company, and we did, together with some other partners, a comprehensive study and analysis of who does what when they cooperate or should cooperate nationally and internationally, fighting cyber attacks and so on and so forth. We did this analysis incorporating most of the Western countries and also some EU countries. We found that each and every country does it differently. But the closer you come to the Prime Minister's office, where they do business and where they have finances, the better solutions. In Denmark, we have the last half year have very serious incidents. You probably heard about this shipping company Maersk and other incidents. Each and every serious incident was handled with the cooperation of private companies. No public entities were capable of helping out. You asked Steve Purser to be a bit provocative, and
Please.
so I am.
Yeah.
And I would like to hear, what is your experience nationally in cooperation between academia, the public and the private, and the different entities, ministries and agencies involved? As I see it, a lot of these people are working in silos without cooperating necessarily.
Okay.
I think it was a gentleman up here mentioning that we're not really sharing. I mean, the one part saying you're not giving, and the other part saying we're not giving, and so on.
I'm going to stop if you don't mind, because you've already posed an excellent question. So the gauntlet, the glove has been thrown. Who would like to take the challenge here? Ilias, please.
I can try to sort of like answer at least some components, and I think others want as well. So first of all, information sharing is not the panacea, it's not the solution to every problem, okay? Let's make this clear. And also, when at least we are talking about information sharing, we're not talking about obligatory reporting. So to your point, Jean-Baptiste, yes, always voluntary. Okay? It's not about the reporting obligation. And also, when we're discussing about information sharing, it's about not how we disclose information about the victims or how we disclose information about our customers. We're never going to do that. We're custodians of their data. It's about how do we make sure that we can pass information to CERTs, law enforcement authorities. I get to be involved in that process because, quite frankly, I sit on the advisory board of Europol that was just mentioned as an example. And I also, actually, I'm the guy who signs off on the cooperation agreement that Symantec writes. So everything I'm with member states, so everything I'm describing is from personal experience. So either we'll share information on the criminal infrastructure, or we'll share information about the indicators of compromise that are being used, or we'll share information about the toolkit that's been used to launch the attack. These are the kind of data exchanges that are likely to happen. And I will also tell you something else. Control of this information, to go back also to what Mr. Poupart, Mr. Schönbohm, also some of the member states mentioned, control of this information is absolutely critical. Because leaking of that information will actually give to the adversary the advantage. Mm-hmm. So I will tell you, for instance, that, again, I'm not giving out a secret. I negotiated the agreement that Symantec has with NATO on information sharing. It took me a year and a half, ladies and gentlemen. And by the way, that's fast by NATO standards. If somebody's worried about the European Union being slow, you know. So why did it take this long? Because both partners wanted to be absolutely sure that we were comfortable on how and under what conditions, how would the traffic light protocol look like on passing the data. Okay. So, all of this tells me what? Absolutely, the higher you go up, the higher the stakes, the more effective the cooperation mechanism is likely to be. But at the same time, it's not just about, oh, give me data or take data. It's also about who do you give the data, does it have the competence, and the data that you have and you as private sector are able to give, are they sufficient to provide the solution, or does the national security agency operator, security provider, user of the infrastructure need to have his own competence as well and his own skills to be able to address the challenge?
Very good. So Mircea, perhaps you would like to follow up on that.
Thank you, Ilias, for that. I mean, it's pretty much, you covered a lot of the things that I wanted to say, but I'm going to comment a little bit on that. So usually when people go and reach out to certs, sometimes they expect like a magic bullet to appear and destroy everything. That's not always the case. And in other cases, certs have to reach out to other organizations. So it's not a process that is going to happen in a few seconds. We're trying to do that, and as well as every other cert in the European Union, everyone is trying to build up their infrastructure to have greater reach in the shortest amount of time possible. But when it comes to information, what I mean by sharing information, sometimes companies, they develop what they have, something like threat intelligence products. And that's great, because it's normal to have. But on the other hand, if you know something that is, for example, criminal in nature, and you don't report it, and you don't go to authorities, then what do? You're actually making a profit out of someone else's criminal enterprises. That's an ethical debate over there.
Okay.
But again, coming up on how we do things as a CERT, for example, we have different partners. We have actually, at this point, we pretty much are flooded with information from our partners, and most of them are from the private sector. And they give a lot of information on IOCs. They give a lot of information on compromised hosts, for example. And it's difficult to reach each and every one of them. We're trying to build some automated system, and in the past year, for example, CERT-RO has processed over 110 million alerts. You know? That's like 3 every second. Now, when it comes to how we work together, well, we work together just
first point, and then we'll pass on.
Yeah, we work together with companies on specific cases. Sometimes they approach us and say, well, listen, we've got this. We're working with law enforcement, we're working with them, and we share the amount of information. And that's really tricky to share some amount of information when it comes to cybercrime. Again, but it's not always related to cybercrime. That's why I try to encourage everyone to contribute to this kind of information sharing. I would like to encourage all the companies to contribute to their national authorities' visibility on their own constituency. The problem is when all parties have different expectations. They want to be involved in a certain investigation, to be part of it and to present it as such, which is normal. Then we try to do a step back, because it's not our mandate to do so as a national CERT. It's something that the police handles, and it's normal to be like that. When it comes to...
I need to take over. You have so many ideas.
Yeah.
So otherwise, I'll come back to you,
okay.
Honestly. Otherwise, because the problem is everyone has so much to say. I would like to pick up on one thing you said, though. The gentleman made a very interesting point that I think at one stage you said that they found that the public authorities were not capable of doing this. Now, I would like to know, first of all, what criteria are you using to decide this, and what are expectations, as you said?
Exactly.
So what I notice is when we talk to different people, we have different expectations, and there is no preset conditions in information sharing. So that's a very good point, but I wanted to give Christoffer the chance to say something too.
Yes, I just want to say now with this obligatory incident reporting, now I'm working with MSP who doesn't have this. We have obligatory incident reporting, but we don't have supervision. And the thing is, with this voluntary information sharing, we have quite a few ISACs at MSB within energy, finance, healthcare, and SCADA. And these ISACs, the prerequisite for them to work is one, it's a stable membership. Two, there's clear terms of references. You know what to expect. Three, there's a very informal atmosphere. You know each other. And one crucial thing here is that someone brought up is within these terms of reference, you need to know how to treat the information, especially when the information has a chain for some reason. For instance, when we're talking about the EU cooperation, you have the national corporations and you have the EU cooperation. So there's a chain here of information.
Okay. So, Axel, and I'll ask you to be brief, please, because this was a great question to start us off.
Perfect. Yeah, as it's going to be a panel debate, so I probably will be a little bit contradictory to what Ilias said. Well, of course, information exchange is good if it's voluntary, but in my experience, that's not enough. Yeah, so there has to be some kind of obligation that is mandatory, because otherwise it won't work. Yeah, definitely on probably more than we have today. So we just have reporting obligations regarding attacks. Yeah, if you only detect some kind of vulnerability, you are not obliged to share it. I don't know if it's enough. But on the other hand, there is at least two preconditions, of course. Yeah, the first precondition is that it has to be disseminated by the body you are reporting to. Yeah, so there has to be a way back, no one way. And the second thing is, and that's probably an issue for many of the sectorial companies, there has to be some kind of one-stop shop. Yeah, so if it's in Germany, for example, the BSI, then we have got our telecommunications regulator. Well, they should exchange the information between both of them. I only want to report to one of them. Yeah? So there has to be some kind of mandatory reporting, one-stop shop, and disseminating of the results, of course, anonymous, to make it available for the community.
Very good. So I have an observation for you. I'm going to be very provocative. Sometimes I think we talk too much and we don't do enough. We talk. I mean, I've been hearing for 10 years we need to share more information. I'm still hearing the same thing. What do you think? Do you see signs that things are improving? Are we satisfying your requirements? Or do you get the impression we're just having the same conversations every year and nothing is moving forward? Who thinks that things are moving forward satisfactorily? Raise your hands. Oh. Oh. Who thinks things are very bad? Raise your hands. Right.
Who sleeps?
And who thinks things could be a lot better but are not too bad? All right. Okay, now, you were one of the gentlemen who raised it. There were two others who raised their hands and said things were very bad. Would one of you like to raise a question or make a remark or give us a pointer in the right direction? No? Okay, any other questions from the audience? Come on, let's warm these people up.
Yes.
So you've already asked the question, but okay, let's go.
Again, Steve, to be a bit provocative, our experience in Denmark is that we get no help from the public whenever we get the firms attacked. They always get in contact with the private companies, and they are the ones that solve the problems.
Right.
And we're past the business of sharing information. That's not really the point. The point is that maybe the competencies of the public are not relevant and not enough. I mean, there's a lot of knowledge out there that is not being used because they are working in silos. So my point is the public is not doing enough. And by the way, I've been in the public, in the armed forces for 40 years.
Very good. I'm going to invite you to my next conference because you warm things up. So, Jean-Baptiste.
Yeah, thank you. I meant to answer to that comment we heard earlier, and you repeated it. Well, somehow I would say that by maybe quoting what Guillaume Poupin, my Director General, said earlier today, that it is each entity's primary responsibility to help itself first. Not saying it is enough, but it's each entity's first responsibility. So building a defensive model based on external assistance is a failed approach. It's not going to work. Even though in some cases it may be needed. But depending on the scenario, depending on the entities, the person who may be supporting you may vary. So you're talking about enterprises, businesses. Well, I would say that, I mean, what you described, and I don't know which company you're talking about, either a regular company, let's say, or a critical operator, and you can imagine that the scenarios may vary here, and that the state may be more interested into critical infrastructures. But you said other companies helped. Well, great. I mean, isn't it what we should be expecting? I mean, to have a vibrant cybersecurity ecosystem helping other businesses, citizens, and also governments, why not? And that's why also I think the idea of pan-European certification framework, which could allow certifying cybersecurity companies, cybersecurity services, let's say, response, detection, etc., could be also a very good idea to support assistance to businesses or governments in need. So then, of course, I mean, and I won't talk specifically about the country you mentioned. In some cases, support from the public authorities, national or governmental CERTs, which own a very specific expertise and a lot of operational experience may be required. And in this case, it is. We hope that. I mean, I'm talking about France, that we are able to provide such assistance because, of course, states have limited resources the same way businesses have, and there are limits, and there will always be limits to what we can do. Mm-hmm. And I believe the NIS Directive, from that perspective, provides a very good basis. And maybe here I'll contradict you, Ilias. Of course, I insisted a lot on the voluntary nature of cooperation between member states. I'm talking on a state-to-state level. The voluntary nature and the trust building is towards the trust building is very important. Now, mandatory notification of incidents, not of all companies, of course, but of operators of essential services critical to the functioning of the single market, is necessary. But I've been involved in the negotiation of the NIS Directive for 3 years, and we have put a lot of securities in it. These notifications should not harm the vital commercial interests of businesses, etc. That means that when exchanging among each other on a voluntary basis, we are also, bound by this vow, let's say. And if I may finish with that word, I think this is also because we need to build trust with our operators, that if we are mandated to share this information with 28 member states, maybe the operators won't continue sharing information with us.
Very good. Ilias and then Mircea.
I wouldn't disagree with anything that Jean-Baptiste said about information, about the information bit, the obligatory notification. We're in favor of the NIS, and we're in favor of the obligatory notifications as described in NIS. We need to separate the discussion, however, to be legally accurate, being a lawyer myself, into what we mean when we talk about information sharing, because I'm sorry, the obligation of me to go and report that an incident occurred is not information sharing, it's this obligatory disclosure requirement for me under the law, versus the option that I as a company have to help the government, the law enforcement, someone who comes, a government CERT, who comes to me with, what do you know? We found this. It looks like a digital bomb of some kind, and we know that you guys have good bomb disposers. Would you please come and tell us what you find and what this can actually do? That's what I'm trying to distinguish between. On your point about the obligatory notification requirements, no problem at all. Totally agree. To Axel's point, only one remark. Obligatory notification requirements around vulnerability disclosure, add to member states. I'd be very careful with that. There's an industry good practice right now of disclosing vulnerabilities once you have a patch for it. Going to a government, any government, and saying, I got a vulnerability, I hope to be able to close it in a month, will start creating many interesting problems because as, let's say, government in member state A, B, C, D would want to use it, So they will want to use this people outside, across the Atlantic, and also, past the Middle East.
Very good.
So
very good.
that's very, very slippery slope.
Okay, you made a good point, Mircea.
I would like to answer to maybe why the government bodies didn't react as you expected. And it's, first of all, every type of CERT or organization has a different mandate in the European Union. They cannot do the same thing or replicate their services. And that's one challenge, meaning that when we talk about how we share information, you have to take into consideration even that. Also, every government body has the amount of power that you, as a citizen, will give it. So, obviously, they will do things if you give them those tools or those attributions, or they will not help you if you just let them be and say, well, you didn't help me once, why should I trust you again? Because then we go back to the issues of trust. You're asking one organization, governmental or whatever, to do something, and you're conditioning the trust. Because, well, if you don't do this, I will not work with you again.
Okay.
That's another ethical issue, but I would emphasize on the mandate of each organization, and I will emphasize on the fact that every government organization can do as much or as little as you let them to
Very good
do.
point.
And also one more quick thing. Every time that we're talking about trust and then we're talking about enforcing something, trust is not built that way. I mean, please let me know if you have ever trusted someone who came to you, do this, or I have a penalty for you.
Okay, very good point. So,
Very good.
Christoffer, if you can be brief, because I would
Yes.
like to take another tack in this discussion, so please.
Yes. If obligatory incident reporting doesn't, obligatory incident reporting needs to lead to something. I mean, otherwise it's just a waste of time to report. And then you have information sharing. My vision, I'm probably very naive here, but is that the mandatory incident reporting goes towards information sharing. Because, for instance, you have a...
Let me challenge you. Let me challenge you before you take this too far,
Yes.
because this is what I want to say.
Yeah.
Collaboration is not information sharing. That's just one aspect of collaboration. Collaboration is getting things done, right? So I would like to now turn the discussion, and you're going there. It's fine to change information, but what happens?
Yes, that's my point now.
Right.
Because if you do, now you have the mandatory part, you have to report, but it needs to be used for something. And then you have the CERT. If you have this notion that with undue delay you report, the CERT can assist you, can help you, can give you back information, and can give the overview to other entities upon request. Then you will have this kind of operational feedback loop.
Good.
But yeah.
Yeah. So let me give you an idea, and then, sorry, I'll open it up again. I should get to say something too, yeah? Let me give a little plea for ENISA. ENISA obviously is at the heart of collaboration. It's our whole business model, and if we don't collaborate, we're useless, yeah? So we recognize this. We leverage experience of the member states. Now, what we have found is that our business model is based on a certain paradigm, and that is we see things very ambitiously, but we take small baby steps to achieve it. And this is really interesting, because I see a lot of people see things ambitiously and set up very big projects, and everyone gets excited, but they're too long, they demand too many resources, etc. So I would make a plea, and I challenge these gentlemen here, maybe they think this is wrong, but what we see more and more, if we have success, it's due to the fact that we try and plan a thing in such a way that we continually buy credibility, build up critical mass, bring people in, and give small things back again rather than going for huge things. Does that resonate with you, or do you think this is not the right way? Are there better ways to do things? I'm taking you off information sharing, by the way. Please.
So I'll answer this and try to get us into information sharing. So, do I buy this? Yes. And by the way, let me take a moment to just say that as far as I am concerned, ENISA and EC3 are models, exemplary models.
Are there any journalists in the room?
of information sharing and cooperation, actually of cooperation, not information, of cooperation within the European Union. As far as I'm concerned, actually, the model of EC3 has copied the original ENISA model, and the fact that it's worked in Athens, actually, or in Crete, and now it's working in The Hague, proves that the recipe is correct. So kudos to ENISA there, first point. Second, are we sort of like, what do we do once we get the information? Or what should be happening once we get the information? Allow me to give very briefly a very personal story. So, I was stupid enough competing with my 3 sons skiing downhill and injured my left knee. So, I had my left knee operated and reconstructed in May this year. And while I'm sitting at my house with my knee stretched, I start seeing the phone buzzing, and WannaCry starts to kick in. So there I am for the rest of the evening, calling everybody I know in the security community that has an operational responsibility. Hey guys, have you seen this? This is the IOCs, this is what we know, this is what you need to look at. What did people do with that information? I know what EC3 did with that information, by the way. I know that at least a national CERT took this information and started scanning their internet space to figure out, is there any critical infrastructure that has a gate open that is likely to put us at risk? People acted on that information, and that is the value that one gets if done timely and if the governance is proper. However, security in the end is every individual responsibility. There's something, there's something immoral about trying to outsource your responsibility to the government. I mean, the idea that I'm going to drive my car, I'm going to drive it unsafely, but there's going to be a policeman who's going to somehow stop me and tell me don't do it, that's not proper.
Okay,
so,
very good. Last chance for you, ladies and gentlemen. Is there anyone who wants to ask a difficult question? You don't get, Christoph, I'm going to choose you, so we'll come to you if we can. Christoph, kick us off.
And there's also a hand in the back.
I know.
There was someone in the back who had the mic as well.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you for a really very, very interesting discussion, even if you are discussing those things for 10 years or more. this discussion is very interesting for me. And I would like just to somehow complicate the scenes, or ask the question, or even say that it's a perfect, just you were discussing the mandatory or obligatory information sharing or cooperation reporting and voluntary-based cooperation, to say not information sharing, not to say information sharing. However, if we are talking about the voluntary cooperation, I of course know that step by step growing is probably the only way we can achieve the higher and higher level. But I would like to ask you, what is your opinion? Assuming that the voluntary cooperation is maybe not the only, but the important way to build the trust and go to the higher levels. Unfortunately, in real life, voluntary cooperation means best effort cooperation. And of course, if we have the examples or analyze the examples from the business world, if you have the agreement, you have the SLA with the customer of your supplier, not feasible in the voluntary cooperation. But what?
First, they're not mutually exclusive. Okay, we can do both.
This is not my question.
Okay.
So, what do you think about in the area of voluntary cooperation? Some concept which I'm naming declared level of service. So we are cooperating voluntary.
Okay.
But I would like to know if I call you Friday evening Do you answer my call on the weekend? Yes.
Okay.
What kind of services I can receive? Yes.
Yes.
So I would like to ask you for your opinion about such kind of
Okay.
of the concept.
So we have two candidates here. I'm going to go to Jean-Baptiste first and then to Axel.
Yeah, thank you very much, Christopher, and my pleasure to answer a question to the Deputy Chair of the Management Board of ENISA. I think what you're talking about is really saying voluntary cooperation doesn't mean lack of ambition in cooperation. And I hope, and this is our commitment, that what we are doing in the CERT network is going to be an evidence of that. And as I took the example of law enforcement cooperation within Europe, for instance, I think this is the proof that you can go from voluntary cooperation and with voluntary cooperation to a very high level of integration. And knowing what types of services you may have by calling a specific country or the whole network is about standard operating procedures. Knowing how to contact, knowing what information I may request, and what type of support I may receive. So again, I think there are really two aspects to that CERT network work we are doing today. There is the visible layer, the one that everyone is interested in. It's do these member states exchange information? Yes, we do. We'll do more in the future. But there is this other, maybe even more fundamental long-term aspect, which is do they put effort in structuring their cooperation? And I think, I mean, this is really the way. Voluntary cooperation, again, doesn't mean lack of ambition.
Very good. Axel, what do you think?
Well, I'm absolutely with you, and also what you said there. There has to be some framework, yeah, of course, because voluntary has to be reliable. Yeah, despite of the fact that it's voluntary, it has to be reliable. Voluntary can't mean, well, I will answer or help you, or probably not, and probably I will let you know. So definitely with you. I'm not entirely sure if something like a service level agreement or something like that would be the right answer, but we have to find concrete ways of cooperation. So what I could imagine, and as far as I understood from the video this morning, something like this is also going on in Estonia, is talking about, for example, about some rapid reaction forces. Yeah, because this would also address the lack of expertise topic you just mentioned. So what we could do on the voluntary base is to set up a rapid reaction force of public and private experts that come together under certain, well, framework and rules if there is a major incident. Yeah, so that could be a framework that could be helpful and reliable, and I would rather go for something like this, very concrete tool and measure, than setting up some kind of, again, service level agreement. I know that's not what you wanted to and asked for, but there has to be a framework, a reliable framework, but not a too strong one.
Very good, very good. Just for the ladies and gentlemen in the audience, because it might not be obvious to all of you, when you're in the context of the CERT network, the biggest CERT is probably around 70 people and the smallest maybe around 6. So expectations are a difficult thing to manage sometimes in this environment. So it's an extremely good remark. And I think it's, we have to build trust based on reasonable expectations. But there was a gentleman down here, or someone I've been missing out, apparently, who's been in. Please, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Kalevi from SKI Solutions, Estonia. Question to the panel about really the issue of the cooperation in a context of what you have discussed, like there is an incident and when do we have to react and how to cooperate. You seem to kind of address it with a one-size-fits-all model, whereas in the physical world you understand that the security is on the individual, on the organizational, or the country level, or the regional level, or whatever. Like there are different measures for different security threats here as well. So how do you define who and when should cooperate on which kind of incidents? Because I think that the expectations of these parties is very different. When they should be addressed with a question for information, when they should not be, when they want to be involved and when not. How to make that clear as a policy when somebody should be involved? What kind of attributes you have?
So your question is, which people should be involved in which response. Is that correct? What kind of incidents involves what?
How to differentiate different threats, different incidents. Yeah.
Right. Who wants to take it?
Well, you start, I can. You want to?
Sure.
Brief, because we're running out of time.
Okay, so first of all, when we're talking about EU cooperation, that's obviously when a threat has had victims of significant importance, or at least victims in at least 2 member states. That's one thing. But if you're going to one national approach, is like whenever you need or want some help with a threat, you can approach authority. And since you're from Estonia, I would recommend going to Clyde Magi and Estonian CERT. The idea behind it is that we cooperate with each other when it comes in different situations, different crises. And when it comes to how CERTs react and how we do things, indeed, it's different from case to case, it's different from threat to threat. What we do is try to coordinate with everyone, and especially here ENISA it plays a really interesting part because they're actually like an information hub when it comes to CERT network. And that was pretty clear in WannaCry when we had to react at our national level. For example, in Romania, although we had published an advisory 1 day before, in the next morning everything was a mess and the media was trying to get as much information as possible. We were trying to coordinate with different stakeholders, all public authorities, and at the same time trying to exchange information through ENISA and try to update that information as fast as possible.
Very good.
So pretty much that is how it is happening operationally.
Now, I have to cut the debate here because I want to end with one question to the panelists, which for me is very important, and I'm going to go this way round. If you were to change one thing in European cooperation at the moment in order to be better, what would it be? Axel, please kick us off.
Well, I would say we are talking about breaking down silos, and we broke down already a few of them, but we should really strive for breaking down all of them, and I think we all know that there are still too many silos.
Okay, good response. Jean-Baptiste.
It's a very difficult question, but I'd simply say it's a change that is about to happen, but I would give more tools to the CERT network, but hopefully very soon we'll have a very efficient platform for our CERTs to cooperate.
Okay. Christoffer?
Yes, I go back to my intervention, and that is that don't let supervision and incident reporting through supervision be like a wet blanket for the striving of sharing vulnerabilities and incidents and learning from them. And another smaller remark is that regarding the CERT network, I am quite impressed by it, that it hasn't been around for so long yet, but already it has been operative and worked with these 2 ransomware situations. When I talked to my colleagues at our CERT, National CERT, I asked them what is missing, and they said one thing that is missing is some kind of a forum on a European level for incident managers to share and to meet other team members.
So you cheated because you said 3 things.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Sorry.
I would also like to echo, by the way, NIS's appreciation for the CERT network, which has really done a great job in a very small time. Mircea, what do you think?
Well, to try to answer shortly, I have something that I really hate. Sorry to say that, but I hate few words, 2 words actually, circles of trust, or 3 words.
Okay.
The way people try to approach cooperation in certain areas is based on circles of trust. And in the beginning, it looks rather great, but it's not, because the CERT network has proven that you can work with other partners if you have that foundation, which is laid by the NIS Directive, and we're all into that, and we all exchange information, being there meet each other and so on. But circles of trust as a whole, as a mechanism that is applied in everything, is wrong, in my opinion, because it means basically that few people in some corner are trying to solve the problem by themselves, and they don't want to understand that you can't do that all by yourself.
So let me challenge you. Circles of trust is wrong. What is right?
I would encourage people to share that information. Of course, obviously, you have to be very careful what you're sharing and how you do it, but be very fair in your expectation.
Okay.
It doesn't mean you don't want to share it because someone else is not in your circle of trust.
Right, so share as widely as possible, yeah.
You can share maybe a limited amount of information that will not cause you any damage, but still contribute.
Okay, very good.
As a community, maybe.
Okay, thank you. Ilias.
So we talked a lot about how policy also is going to drive more information sharing and cooperation. Let me give you my concern or my worry about a policy development that, let's say, is likely to stop information sharing and cooperation, and I'd like to see that changed. So we've got right now on the table a proposal around e-privacy that's been discussed at the European Parliament. We like e-privacy, we support the provisions around confidentiality, but I fear that the way these have been written make it possible for companies like telcos, like the one Axel represents, to capture, process data for security purposes and share this information, but make it impossible for everybody else, like CERTs, security companies, financial service operators, the rest of the community ecosystem to do that. So if it's an area right now in Brussels that has alarmed me very much and I'm very concerned, it's that one, and that's what I'd like changed.
Very good. So listen, I think I'm going to wrap up. I promised to Steve Wilson from EC3 I would say a few words for him. Ilias mentioned it. We have a great collaboration with EC3. It's a very good example of interinstitutional collaboration. We're also collaborating with EDA, CERT-RO, and a number of other partners. So I hope you see this. As EU institutional bodies, we really try to come together. And of course, we have what I consider to be an extremely positive cooperation with the member states. And equivalently, we're trying to do our best to satisfy industry as well. So, of course, it's very challenging when you've got so many partners. But from an ENISA's perspective, I would like to say I totally agree with the panelists. Collaboration is key. No one can do everything in this space. It's far too big. So I think the key for the future is decreasing fragmentation and making sure that we all do the right thing and we leverage skill sets correctly across the union. Now, I'm going to end by apologizing to these guys because I was a bit tough on them from time to time and I cut them off. But it was an interesting debate, and I would like to thank them.